So over the last week or so, we have all been following the story of Rodney Hinton Jr. and his son, who was 18 or 19 years old. This was in Cincinnati a week ago Thursday. Police came upon a car that had been reported stolen. Rodney Hinton Jr.'s son was driving the car, and there were 4 people total in the car. They scattered. A police officer chased Rodney Hinton Jr.'s son, said that he had a gun that he had pointed at officers. He did not. He had not pointed a gun at officers. And Ohio is an open carry state. You don't need a permit to carry a handgun in Ohio. Regardless, he was black. And this officer shot Rodney Hinton Jr.'s son 4 times in the back and killed him. The car was not a stolen car. It belonged to Rodney Hinton Jr.'s son, but he had missed a payment on the car. And the bank, the lending company, reported it stolen after he missed 1 payment. Speaking as an attorney, the lawsuit that this family has against that bank is going to be significant. It's going to be significant. If they had not reported the car stolen, a car that was this kid's car, if they had not reported it stolen because he had missed a payment, that young man would be alive today. And then the following day, Rodney Hinton Jr., upon viewing the body cam footage of his son being executed by a police officer, went out and, using his motor vehicle, ran over and killed the first law enforcement officer that he saw. And a lot of people have a lot of feelings about that. A lot of feelings about that father doing that in response to his son being executed by a police officer. And, one of the issues that it raises is accountability for police officers who do things like shoot and kill Americans. Police killed over 1,300 Americans last year. They're on pace to pass that this year so far. And this week, so in 2023, I think it was, late 2022, early 2023, there was an incident in Memphis, Tennessee, involving a young man named Tyre Nichols, who was pulled over by police. And upon pulling this young man over, also a young black man, police immediately drew their weapons, immediately started pepper spraying him, immediately started manhandling him, and Tyre Nichols tried to escape. And they caught him and they beat him to death on camera. And 3 of those officers earlier this week, who were on trial for killing Tyre Nichols, a jury trial, they were acquitted by a jury in Memphis, Tennessee, despite that beating death having taken place on camera. And is it really an unreasonable thing in the United States in 2025 to believe that it is difficult, if not impossible, to get justice against a police officer who shoots and kills someone and then turns out to be wrong? The list of black people killed by police or former police officers in the United States is an extremely long list. especially when you count black people who were unarmed at the time that they were killed, or sitting in their living room, or sleeping in their bedroom, or standing in their kitchen, or walking home from 7-Eleven. People just minding their own businesses. And so, it's in that spirit. There was a very good article that came out today on The Atlantic by David Graham. It's called Tyre, Nichols and the End of Police Reform. It's subtitled, "If a savage beating captured on camera cannot produce a murder conviction, the chances of fixing the police brutality problem in this country are pretty bleak." And for further background on this case, Mr. Graham writes, in January 2023, I traveled to Memphis to report on the killing of Tyre Nichols, an unarmed black man beaten to death by a group of Memphis police officers. Like most Americans, I have seen far too many videos in recent years of police brutalizing people, and I had reported on the particular failures of justice in Memphis itself, a city afflicted both by under-policing in the form of high rates of violent crime in its poor neighborhoods and over-policing in the form of widespread police abuse. Even so, I was shocked when I saw the videos of this incident that had been released by the city of Memphis. A team of police from a special squad called the Scorpion Unit. I mean, think like the strike force from that FX TV show, The Shield, from 20 years ago. A team of police from a special squad called the Scorpion Unit savagely beat Tyre Nichols and then didn't bother to provide any medical aid. They did most of this underneath Sky Cop, one of the ubiquitous Memphis surveillance cameras, evidently unworried that they would face any repercussions for their actions. They were wrong, but not that wrong. Although 5 officers were quickly fired and the Scorpion Unit was disbanded, it now seems possible that few, if any, will be convicted of the most serious charges in a man's senseless death. This week at trial in Memphis, a jury acquitted 3 of the former officers involved in Nichols' death on several charges, including second-degree murder. 2 other officers have agreed to plead guilty to some federal and state charges, and one of those officers testified at the trial that wrapped up this week. The same 3 officers were convicted of witness tampering in a federal trial last year, and one was convicted of violating Nichols' civil rights by causing bodily injury. There is still no good explanation for why any of this happened. Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis said the officers appeared to have no reason to pull Tyre Nichols over in a traffic stop in the first place. Yet as soon as they did, some of the officers drew weapons and began pepper spraying and manhandling him. When he, understandably, tried to escape, police called for backup, gave chase, and eventually caught him. I hope they stomp his ass. One officer, who did not chase Nichols and who was not charged, was recorded saying, his fellow officers did just that, beating Tyre Nichols just yards from his mother's house, and he died at the hospital. Prosecutors face some challenges in the case, despite the existence of video evidence. First, officers are seldom charged with murder, and when they are seldom convicted. Second, the 3 former officers who stood trial were, in the words of the deputy district attorney, the least culpable. Compared with the 2 who agreed to plead guilty. Third, defense lawyers successfully argued that widespread news coverage in Memphis of the killing would preclude a fair trial. So instead of a jury pool from Memphis, which is majority black, the jury was an all-white jury drawn from a jury pool from around Chattanooga on the opposite side of Tennessee. Even so, District Attorney Stephen Mulroy seemed shell-shocked after the verdict. Was I surprised there wasn't a single guilty verdict on any of the counts or any of the lesser included offenses, given the overwhelming video evidence that I think we presented? Yes, I was surprised. Do I have an explanation for it? No, I don't. I would refer him to the previous paragraph that described how he wound up in a fucking trial of police murdering a young black man and had an all-white jury from the other side of the state. It was on video. I watched it. It was on video. Acquitted on multiple charges, multiple lesser included offenses, not one single guilty verdict on anything. Continuing with the article, the outrage that met George Floyd's murder in 2020 seemed at first to be a turning point for criminal justice. You remember that? Yeah. After a string of high-profile cases starting in 2015, officials and the public were aligned in demanding law enforcement reforms that would punish and prevent needless killings. But as I wrote when Derek Chauvin was convicted for kneeling on Floyd's neck until he died, that case was a rare exception, not least because of the stomach-churning video evidence involved and the strong condemnation by the Minneapolis police chief. Although individual prosecutions were important, the greater need, I argued, was for systemic reforms. The verdict in Memphis shows what an outlier Chauvin's conviction was. Despite videos at least as horrifying, despite the police chief's quick action to fire the officers and condemn their behavior, these three former officers escaped murder convictions. Meanwhile, the changing political winds and rising violent crime after 2020 helped the movement toward broader reform stall out, both locally in Memphis as well as nationally. Trump has Trump has long called for more brutal policing and expanded immunity for police officers, complaining that cops aren't allowed to fight crime with the necessary toughness. Please don't be too nice, he said in a speech to Long Island officers in 2017. After taking this time, he closed a database tracking serious offenses by federal police officers, which was designed to facilitate background checks. He also issued an executive order to, quote, unleash police officers and have private law firms provide pro bono legal defense work for officers accused of misconduct. What I do know is this: Tyre Nichols is dead and deserves to be alive, the prosecutor said on Wednesday. The failure of courts to secure murder convictions for former officers who beat him and of politicians to bring greater accountability means that he will not be the last to suffer such an unjust death. Sorry to be such a bummer on a Friday evening, but these stories in these circumstances are extremely important. Cops murder people with impunity, especially if you're black. That's just the reality of the United States of America. And which makes what Rodney Hinton Jr. did a week ago when he ran over and killed a law enforcement officer not excusable. But if you say that it's not understandable, you're not being honest. You're just not.